Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Morley.
And today we are joined by MSU Mystical Certified Life Coach Trealor Hocking, everybody.
Hi. Nice
Trealor, yeah, always a pleasure having you on. And let's just dive into it. Today you want to talk about how over-responsibility isn't divine responsibility.
Yes, absolutely. And just to share that this has been something that's kind of come out of my blind spot recently, and I'm still working through it, but it's been a pretty amazing thing to start to understand some of the patterns that I'm running in my blind spot and how I have a tendency, through the woundedness that I personally have, to show up as over-responsible, or what I would call in overaction. And when we talk about it not being divine responsibility, really it's on the basis of me understanding that a lot of this overaction that I have is survival patterns running, rooted in, this need to feel safe and have my needs met, be validated, be heard, things like that. And so the overaction shows up as a really masculine energy, and it looks like it might be needed. And in fact, for years, I was convinced that this overaction was what was needed in order to get stuff done, right? In order to make sure that me and everyone in the environment is safe and taken care of. And the reality is it keeps me from presence. It keeps me in a single-minded focus, as opposed to like reading the room as well, for instance. And I'm not able to come forward in the situation leading with feminine energy, which is, the divine energy of responsibility. And so it's like the cart's before the horse. The masculine energy is what shows up first. And so it's something I'm really looking at right now. And just really been getting curious in the ways it shows up in my life.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people can relate to this. I'd love for you to go deeper into the over-responsibility, because even you and I, before we went on the podcast, I asked you a question. You were like, see, I'm oversharing. I'm doing it again. I'm in my masculine. So can you go a little deeper into that so the audience at home really can grasp this?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I think that this over responsibility, this overaction, this oversharing is tied up with a lot of stuff. First of all, it's definitely a survival mechanism, right? Getting your needs met. As a child, I had a detached parenting. And so it meant that I always had to get my own needs met, even emotionally in a lot of ways. And so there's one part of it. And then another part of that, being a child of a detached parent, was I was always missing the validation, that I needed. And so when I start to overshare, there's got to be a thread, a vein of somewhere needing to be validated, not just get the needs met or handle the situation. And that's definitely true. And so I bring this to the table constantly with my friends. It's like, hey, how are you? And I'm like, oh, hey, I'm working on this, and I overshare that. And it's this constant diatribe of what's going on for me in the journey to healing, even, which is a pretty cool topic to share, but it's not coming from, humility. Right? It's not coming from appreciation for maybe that's not what they wanted, because I wasn't present. I didn't see the truth in their question. And so in business, it shows up as I'm the person who immediately digs in. and all of a sudden there's a ton of masculine energy in in a meeting from me. It's like lining out what needs to be done, tasking that to people, and all of that structure, is great and healthy. However, when it's coming from a place of woundedness, when it's coming from a place of, I don't feel safe in this environment unless I'm in control, when it's coming from from a place of, I want to be understood, when it's coming from a place even hidden that I'm really looking for some validation here, and that's why I'm showing up so strong, there's nothing feminine about that. There's nothing divine about that. And so what I'm realizing is I need to rewrite, if you will, a lot of the action that I have, and a lot of the behaviors that I have in the way I show up in all of those instances, in business, in friendships, in relationships, because my hope is that I can come from divine responsibility. Right? Divine responsibility honors everyone, right? It surrenders to the situation as opposed to tries to take charge of it. So,
yeah. I definitely fall into the category of oversharing. And especially in my romantic relationships. It's something that I've been very aware of over the last couple of years, of how much I share with my partner, especially about past partners and around that topic. And I've wondered, what is this? And I remember with Ellie, her and I talking, this was a long time ago, and when I would bring up something that was an overshare, and us going into it and me thinking I wonder, and I've not got to the root of it yet, I wonder what is causing me to overshare. And I wonder if by the time my healing journey is done, if that actually will disappear or dissolve, that program of oversharing, or whether that's just part of me being an honest person. And I go back and forth about this. And at times I'm like, no, I'm just being honest and I'm being true to myself. But then I go into, but do you need to be that honest? Do you need to share all of those details? And so it's really cool for me to listen to you talk about this, because this is definitely something that I need to address within myself.
Yeah. I love it.
It's really interesting. As a mystical life coach and as Danny's partner, and hearing you, Trealor, I'm the opposite of you guys, where I know, Danny, you grew up with a disengaged, and you had also, Trealor, you had a disengaged parent. For me, I grew up in enmeshment. So it was like I had to sacrifice my needs to always constantly listen to my mother and my father's needs, right? And so for me, I'm not an oversharer, I'm an undersharer, because it's never been about me. So then, so even in my partnership with Danny, the way I show up is I just listen. And that feeds into his oversharing program, because he just gives and gives. And so the question I have for both of you is it what's coming up for me when I listen to you guys? Is it because nobody was there to really listen to you guys, that when you have someone or an audience to share, that's where everything comes out, because you were never given that as a child? Is something that comes up for me as I listen to the both of you.
What do you think, Danny?
I'd have to really feel into the energy. It's not something I've done it a few times, but I've not done loads of work around this. But from what I've felt, it feels like because I wasn't listened to as a child, I just want someone to share something with. And so when I get the opportunity, I don't know where the healthy boundary is.
Right.
And I just, and from what I've learned about connecting with another is that you connect with another through sharing. And so I think it's also a part of me that is overreaching this, trying to share too much because he just wants to connect. Because when he was a kid, he didn't have anything to connect to. So now when he gets presented an option to connect, it's like, oh, he's going way too far to ensure that this person is connected to him. That's how I feel. What about you, Trealor?
I think it's beautiful, because I definitely have a vein of that exact thing in the purpose of me oversharing. And because I'm looking at this really with a microscope right now, I can see so many more aspects of it. Like it's so entrenched in the way that I operate as a human, because I didn't have, literally on the basis of survival, right? I wasn't maybe having some of my basic needs met, or I was worried that those needs weren't going to be met. And even and I know I've talked about this before, as a single parent, the one that was solely responsible for my household for years and years. I think that there's this overdeveloped sense of responsibility because, one, I created purpose in my life to need to be responsible, right? Being a mother. But then as a child, the only way I was seen was when I showed up with responsibility, right? So it created this foundation for me of truly being validated and seen when I took all the responsibility. And so there's this natural instinct for me to just show up always taking responsibility. I have natural leader characteristics. I have no problem stepping in and going, all right, got this. And there's so much masculinity in that. And it was needed in my life for a while, but it's not needed in every situation. And for me, I'm missing the discernment, if you will. That's a big word that I've really been looking at in the last couple of weeks is, where's the discernment here? I think we talked about this, the three of us, before. Is it necessary for me to share that? Right? That's the beginning of discernment. And I'm not even going there, right? Because that's presence. I'm just on this road of over responsibility, over commitment, because that's how I programmed myself, right, to survive. Mm-hmm. And so I think that when I do start to overshare, that's when that vein of validation comes in. And I would be somebody who isn't on the warrior's path if I didn't admit that to myself. Yeah. Right. And I was speaking to a friend, a really good friend this weekend. And I was like, man, this thing happened. And I saw this pattern in me. And I was so disgusted by it that I got pissed off. Like I was literally raging pissed at myself. And then I was like, look at you raging pissed at yourself. Like, come on, but I had to go through all the emotions of really seeing the truth of what was there, the truth of how I was showing up and starting to understand the foundations of that behavior, which, by the way, lots of people benefit from that behavior. Lots of people benefit from me taking charge.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, lots of people benefit from my over responsibility. Do I? No. And that was why I got mad this weekend, is I saw my over communication. I saw my oversharing, not necessarily hurt me, but I empowered somebody to not take responsibility.
Right.
And I was like, holy crap. How many times in my life have I worn the total responsibility badge because I show up and don't allow someone else to take responsibility?
Oh,
Isn't that crazy? And so that was like what I was going through. So when I was talking to my girlfriend about it, she was like, dude, this is the way of the skunk. She studies, these archetypal energies. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, your over communication is stinking up the room. And I was like, oh my God, it is, in some respects, because there's missed opportunities for other people when I'm all out there all the time, and like you said, Danny, there's a beautiful thing about being humble. There's a beautiful thing about being open. There's a beautiful thing about wanting to share the lessons that you've learned to benefit others. However, there's, usually the basis of something else that started it all to begin with.
Great. That was awesome. It triggered it. I had to write a few things down because it triggered a few thoughts. And it's taken me deeper into my process. And I loved that line you said, the only way I was seen was where I showed up as responsibility. Yep. And so in your, child's eye, therefore you have to be responsible in order to be seen, which is obviously allowing you to feel some level of love when you're seen. So I'm just trying to relate that back to my personal wound. And I guess it was something to do with, if I overshare, then I can be, if I'm not 100% truthful and honest about what I'm experiencing or what I'm thinking, then this person is gonna walk away or leave. And I think somewhere in there, I need to unpack that more, but somewhere in there is some more wound, some more pain, probably stemming back from abandonment or disengaged parents, somewhere in there that I need to address. So thank you. That's really started shining a light on this program for me. So thank you.
Yeah.
You know, Trealor, what came up for me is like, when you do the over responsibility, right, it's also energetically taking away a chance for somebody else that's within the circle to step into their power, right?
Yes.
So it's continuing the cycle of weakness within them. And then it becomes codependency as well, because then they're depending on you. Well, you're always responsible. Well, you always take care of everything, right? So it's everybody's repeating cycles and actually nobody's elevating. But the moment that you begin to see that you're running this program, then all of a sudden it shakes everyone else up and they're like, well, what do I do now? It's like, well, you now take responsibility over yourself. And so it's a huge gift, but you also have to move through. People don't understand, like, it's not like you face the pain, you go, okay, healed. No, there's a process that happens, right? So for you, it's also, it's anger and it's rage. And we do this thing of like, even when you're like, I was so disgusted by myself, we also have to move through this thing of like the self-hatred and then becoming aware of the self-hatred. And then as you move through all of these rounds and then you get to the love, and then we can alchemize all these things. But that's what came up for me when you were talking about this over responsibility of like, we become reliant on you to be that responsible. And in reality, that's just letting our weakness just shine over and over and over again.
Yeah. And when we talk about, the masculine versus the feminine, that's how I lead, right? Masculine is bam. And I've got plenty of beautiful feminine attributes about me in the way that I show up, for sure. However, in those instances, divinity isn't even like allowed to breed, if you will. It's not even, there, because of the lack of presence of what I was bringing to the situation. As you were so eloquently said, I'm enabling people to not have their own growth, to not figure out how, to be this sovereign being that stands in their power and meets their own freaking needs, for instance. And so and when I got mad at myself and disgusted, it was like, holy shit, how dare I take that? If we're showing up giving, right? If we're showing up in love, if we're showing up with highest good, just literally the thought of wanting to always be present for the highest good of all, that's that beautiful feminine energy that's leading the way. But if I'm showing up with the masculine, it's in wrong order. And to recognize for me that when I come with presence and start to discern, is it necessary? Is what's coming up for me that I feel the need to act on? Is it true? Right. And just kind of like learn to discern those things. I'm allowing other people, even just the space to maybe even take the train of responsibility, right? Just in my pause alone. So that's amazing. And try to figure out how I can show up in a blended way, because I would never do it on purpose, for Pete's sake. A lot of us don't do things like that on purpose. But yeah, it's just been a really cool realization for me.
You mentioned the archetypes of gender, divine masculine and feminine. And this was actually something that I just messaged Rachel Fiori about yesterday. Just a few hours ago, actually, because I was reflecting on yesterday the way of responsibility, and I was reflecting on the areas of my life that I need to be more responsible in. And I started to thinking about the ways of oneness and whether each one is more divine masculine or divine feminine. Because as I was thinking about the way of responsibility, I need to be more accountable with myself. And for me, that's like a masculine energy. Do you see responsibility as more of a masculine dominated thing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I'm asking that question about myself right now, especially with this overaction, right? And, this over responsibility that I show up as. And I'm still trying to figure that formula out for myself because, I'm 52 years old.
Looking 32.
Thank you. But this habit is like really well ingrained, right? And it's a pattern. It is a behavior pattern that I run. And, and so trying to figure out, and Rachel and I have talked about this situation, not specifically, maybe over the last 6 weeks ago. And she was like, look at presence. Right. And that's like right after responsibility, by the way, in the ways of one, like it's really, really close to it. And she was like, look there, for you to figure out how to balance, because I told her, like, I've been running like this forever, this whole lifetime. And so I don't quite understand yet what the balance is in that. But I know that if I, one, get grounded, open my heart up, get present with myself, start to discern, because we're highly sensitive people, the energies that I'm sensing, send back what's not mine, get the information from it. Look at what's mine, get the information from it. I've already made all this space where I'm not jumping right on the control train. Yeah. I'm not jumping straight on, the over responsibility or the over action train. And that in itself is presence. And that's the feminine. So I want to, one, keep these great attributes. It's what makes me great at operations. What makes me great at an accountant, being an accountant, is knowing what stage everything needs to go in. I'm very good at that. I'm very good at building a strong foundation upwards, in my business world sense. However, in life, I'm going to take it back to like when I had an anxiety and depression disorder. I was at a point one day where I would have anxiety and I would go, okay, all right, I'm not bleeding. The room's not on fire, right? My kids are safe. The daycare hasn't called. My bills are paid. There's food, and because this overaction comes from that survival technique. Do you see how I'm linking them together? They're that survival need in me. And so maybe that's what needs to happen for me to unlearn this, is kind of get back to that one tool I used to use. Where like, you know what? All my basic needs are met. Now I can get grounded. Now I can get into the space of the heart. Now I can start to discern and then ask myself, this idea came to share. Is it necessary? And so I'm just working on that.
Yeah. Something Rachel said one time in class really stuck with me of, when we run programs, it's our inner child running the program, right? The inner child is showing up and running the over responsibility program. And that's what, we teach at MSU is about being the mystical parent, which is why did your inner child begin the birthing of the program of over responsibility? Well, you had a detached parent, right? So for you had to be your own adult. You had to be your own mother. You had to guide your own way as a child. And so the work that we teach is going to that energy where it was first birth and giving that child everything that it already has within her, to remind her, like, this experience was given to you for this specific reason. And yes, because you didn't know how to heal it at that time, it's carried over with you. And now you get this beautiful opportunity to go back into that place, to love her, to let her know she doesn't need to do all of these things, right? To be her mother, to be her parent. And this is how we begin to heal this energy. This is what alchemy truly is, right? But it is about being acutely so self-aware that you're even running this. So what you're moving through right now, Trealor, is a beautiful example of how we begin to heal, this low frequency that's been with us for such a long time. And so I just love your process, and I love how you're detailing it, because I think it's going to help a lot of people at home to really understand, like, all right, so how do we fix these programs and how do we begin to alchemize? And that's really, you're hitting the money and you're really walking us through all of this. So it's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. And to say this, that, I've needed a couple healing sessions the last couple days. One of the amazing things, excuse me, about MSU, Masters of Self University, is we have this beautiful team, of coaches and resources with each other. And we're always encouraged to reach out to each other. And we do, right? Because what's great about having somebody that knows these skills like we do and can help our clients is that we can help each other in the times where we need that support. So even though we're mastering the skill ourselves, it's so beautiful when you have somebody else to have the spaciousness with you and the safety, if you will, and the unconditional love that allows that inner child to like show her face and really be present. And so what's amazing is that just on Monday, because, you know, this is a thing for me right now, I had a session. And when we got to that little girl, I was like, oh, baby, you know, you just, you know, like we're just doing your best, you know, just to handle everything that you could. And I could feel in me literally a cinder block in the space of my heart. And I was sharing with this other coach, you know, like, I can't will this away. Right. I can't, you know, I've been sitting here trying to get to this little girl to teach her how to open her heart and heal this situation. And, you know, I need some help. And she's like, okay, so you're powerful enough to do that for yourself. How are you going to help yourself? And what was really incredible about it, I was like, okay, open your heart even wider and ask the little girl, what do you need? And she was like, I need the softest, most gentlest, most nourishing love right now. And look at me get emotional. It was so beautiful. I was like, look at you. Look at how smart you are. And so I was like, how can I embody that for her right now? How can I show that to her right now? And I was like, you know what? We talked about archetypes earlier. I was like, I'm bringing in the archetypal energy of Mother Teresa. If you can imagine all of the gentle, tender care that she gave. And I was like, that's what I'm bringing to her. That's what I'm bringing to that beautiful little girl. And that's when I could finally get into that cinder block, right? She needed somebody who was going to be so unconditional with her, so nurturing, so supportive, right? Somebody who was going to just literally dress all of her wounds, right? You know, if you think of beautiful Mother Teresa. And I brought that to her and I said, this has always been here available to us. It's time for us to let this in. Let this in. Right. And I could feel that cinder block starting to dismantle itself. Right. And I still have some more work there because boy, it was a cinder block, you know, some dense shit, you know, because I can feel it right there, just calling attention to it. It's a little heavier on the back because that's what over responsibility is. Right. We feel the weight of it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You mentioned something a second ago, a few minutes ago, that I'd love you to go a little deeper into. You mentioned about how it was the overaction was linked to your survival program or a survival program. Because when you said that, it triggered something in me. And what I was thinking is, well, for me to survive, I have to connect. Because to survive, we have to have love, whether it's from within or external. I think humans, we could probably all agree, need some form of love in their life. And, you know, as children, we get this from our mothers. And the goal is to mature this child up so eventually the child can start getting the love from within. But obviously, we're not taught that in society at the moment, or we're going through a bit of a renaissance of self-love, right? This is why we're all here. But really is to be connected to that love. And that is one of the core, from having depression, I really felt like without love in my life, without feeling that connection to my heart, life was pointless living. There's no point living this life because there's no love in it. And for me, one of the meanings of life is to experience love, to give love, to have love be given to you and know what that feels like. And like, to me, there isn't a greater joy than sharing love with another, whether that be the person walking down the street that you say hi to in the morning, or a romantic partner, or your dog, whatever it is. It's all about love. And while you were talking, what I was experiencing was this younger version of me going, well, if I can't connect to somebody, I don't get love. And therefore, to survive, I must overshare. And if I overshare, well, then I can receive love in some fashion. Is that the same kind of mechanism that you were mentioning for your example?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful conversation. I love it. Thank you. When I was listening to you, the first place that I went to was me being responsible at home meant that I had value.
Right.
It totally meant that I had value. For instance, I did the dishes, I fed the dog, I made the shopping list, I did the laundry, I did the housekeeping from a very young age. And I don't ever remember being asked. I just did it. And so I think that in, some childhood mind of mine that I connected, I had value. And it's because I was praised when it was noticed. That's when I got attention. And I'm a very loving mother. I mean, I got attention. She was just an attached mother also, right? But I got attention and was validated and had purpose in this family. And I really do think that I hear that word purpose and I'm like, ding, I wasn't the favorite and that's okay, right? And so for me, I had purpose. I wasn't the apple of my mother's eye, right? But if I did these things, there was value there. She saw the value in me. Isn't that interesting? So it became a survival mechanism for me to get love. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah. The survival wounds, I mean, are the core wounds, right? And so for me, as I listen to the both of you, it's for me, it's just been this journey of I had to sacrifice myself really young to survive, right? So I needed to be just the pillar to listen to, I always call myself like, I was like the whipping board, like everything was projected onto me. And then I had to survive that, which meant sacrifice yourself so that you can be strong enough for them. Right. And so when I go into my inner child, I'm moving through a stage right now where she is raging out, where she is trashing her room, where she's punching things. Even today, when I went deep in, I had two versions of my higher self holding my inner child back because she wanted to just go after her parents and like just I wanted to just let them know that they ruined me, that they did this to me, that they made me out to be like this, and now I got to suffer all these consequences and I have so much pain and I can't stand it. And what I felt of my two versions of my higher self as they were holding her back, they were just being like, just ignite the light as you rage. And I felt her just calm down. And I realized going after mom and dad and blaming them, and where is that going to bring you, Ellie? Like, it's not going to bring you anywhere. And then as she calmed down, she just kind of crumbled to the ground and started crying. And that's when I came in and I was like, this is all okay, baby. Cry, feel it all. But we're not going to grow and go anywhere by blaming anybody else, because what she's actually searching for is just love. She just wants love. And that's what we all want. Right. And so hearing you, it just brings me really into like, my survival programs of just wanting to be validated so much. But I did the opposite. I didn't become over responsible. I became under responsible, and I just became a shell of myself to survive and gain love. And so, I just think these perspectives are important for our listeners at home to really hear, because all of us go through such different but very similar experiences. And so I just want to share that.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so glad you did too, because even just hearing what Danny's sharing, where our similarities are, there's still differences there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
There's definitely, the abandonment flavor, if you will, over on his side. And there's this rigid flavor over on my side, that couples up with, with this pattern that I run. So it's so intriguing, and it's beautiful in every sense of the way, because this is what life is, people. This is what life is. And when we really learn how to do these tools, the tools that actually do alchemize this stuff, that's the path to liberation, right? And the path to freedom. And so even though I got mad at myself earlier, right, and this weekend, and was self-loathing, to honor that process. Right. And like you were just sharing, Ellie, to honor the process that this girl was just like trash in the room, man. And have the spaciousness for them, because not allowing that to work through is just stifling it. And it isn't going to lead to the liberation and the healing of that, and, the true alchemy of it. And so, I still needed to self-loathe for a little bit. Right. And then when I was like, wow, well, that feels crappy. Are you ready to move past to the next thing, and then to reach for the next thing like you did, right? Where it was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to let the love shine in.
Yeah.
And that's when, that Teresa energy was like, yeah, man, I better learn how to embody this for myself, because this is the tenderness that she needs right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And the irony of the self-loathing, right? We need to move through that, but that's a lack of love within, right?
Exactly.
Which then goes back to the love that we're trying to seek outside of us for. And so I think catching yourself in the self-loathing and self-hatred, because I catch myself a lot of doing that. I'm going, this is the opposite of what we're trying to do, but let it all come out and then come back to love, because this is exactly what we're seeking.
Yeah. Not stifle it down and then just be stuck.
Right.
Yeah. Move through it. Yeah. Don't stop yourself.
I was just talking the other day with one of my clients, and I was explaining to her about the healing journey, and the more that you heal, almost the less you feel, because you're less triggered. But then it gets to a certain point where you start to get really curious about the underlying programs that are running like 24/7, and the ones that aren't blaring with you with like flashing lights and full bloody like activations of fear, and that when you're really getting along the path, these more subtle ones, you'll start to become more aware of these subtle programs. And the way I was explaining it was like, layers of an onion, you peel back each layer that you go into, and the more subtle programs are more hidden in the deep psyche, the deep unconscious parts. And so it's just awesome that you're bringing these up right now, because it shows where you're at. You're now addressing these deeper parts of you, linked to survival, the core wounds that we really hold. And that means you can see where you're at, is what I'm saying. And I'm just honoring you for being there. Is there any other, obviously we've gone over a lot of responsibility, is there any other programs that you found similar to this, that are kind of like underlying, that you're becoming aware of in your day-to-day life, that aren't screaming at you, but oh, there's something under there that I've not got to yet?
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. It's funny because you said, like, you do a bunch of work and then you find yourself not being triggered, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in total Triggerville again. And it's when you've gotten to that deep layer, and just to recognize, as I continue to dissolve a lot of these patterns, that I have higher sensitivities. And so there's a potentiality to be triggered. And so to recognize things that were so hidden before because there wasn't that blazing thing in my face. How would I describe a couple of those? Definitely unworthiness. It's so crazy how I can hear myself repeat myself. So this simple little behavior, I might say the same sentence 2 or 3 times, and it's an unworthiness pattern running in me. So I catch myself doing that. I catch myself, at meetings, I catch myself with a group of friends. So it's usually not when it's a singular kind of conversation, but when there's a lot of people and I'm dealing with a lot of energies as a highly sensitive person, and I get triggered there. And so it's one of those little things that shows up in the background for me. And I catch myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, you just repeated yourself 3 times the same sentence. Huh. Open your heart, baby, and give yourself some love right now, because you're running in, it's definitely rooted in unworthiness. And we're just going to look at that today. And I've seen that one a lot.
Yeah.
The last couple of months.
It's really fascinating, because I keep getting to these places where I'm like, okay, I've worked, I've done that. I've finished it. That's that wound done. Don't have to worry about that ever again. And then 1 month later, I'm like, oh, there's a whole nother layer.
Oh yeah.
Another layer to the onion that I've got to go into, and let me take that off the top shelf and Let's start working at it again.
Mhm.
And it does come to an end. You know, Rachel talks about this. It does come to an end. You can be fully fully heal and hold, fully healed and whole.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly still a work in progress, and I enjoy it. I love the work. You know, just today I was getting really triggered, and I can tell it's time for another wave of healing. I could really feel it. I've gone maybe the last month. I've been in bit kind of like cruise mode, and it's time for another wave for me to go through again and go deeper into myself. And I prefer those waves. I'd rather be doing the work than not.
Yeah.
And Joy loves this stuff. He loves it. I'm out here. I'm like, okay, so when's the end? You know.
Can I share a secret with you guys? Rachel and I've talked about this before. That there is a pretty primal fear about me becoming enlightened in me.
Ooh.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
What the hell is that?
That's a whole other podcast episode.
We have totally talked about it.
You
know, in her coaching with me in the past. And it was super primal. And I can honestly say that I can feel that. That's hilarious. Just surfaced itself when I said it, you know, because we shine the light, right? And there it is when we get real sensitive to our own triggers. And it's not as strong because she and I've done some work on it for me. It's not as strong. I know why it's there. It's some generational stuff, you know, that I brought. And also I think that there's a hint of, you know, I'm on a mission here, and we're amazing pioneers when we're doing this work, you know, if you will, spiritual warriors in this. And it's important for me to have done this work so that I can stand in integrity and authenticity in this, you know, bringing it to others. And so I think there's a part of me that's like, how will I relate? If I, you know, because I don't know what fully healed looks like. And I mean, we can look at Rachel and she relates to us perfectly well, but there was that misbelief tied there. Isn't that interesting?
Super interesting.
Yeah. So, you know, so I'm still working on that. Not at the extent that I was. It definitely isn't primal like it was before, but it's on the fringe. Yeah. It's there. Hilarious.
For me, what always comes up is, am I really ready to let go of everything?
Right.
Like, can I really surrender and let it all go? All of the things that I really thought, oh, well, this is life, this is it. When I'm really ready to let that go, I know that's when I'm gonna start really elevating. But even when I had that, I've mentioned it before on the podcast, I had this Kundalini rising, and I felt my ego, as the energy was rising, my ego just grabbed everything and pulled it back down. Got a lot of work to do to dissolve this ego before I can get there. So that's okay. Yeah. I'm trying to be patient. Yeah. And there was a younger version of me just wanted to get to the finish line, get to the finish line. And it really showed up a couple of years, last year when I went to do ayahuasca. That was the one message that I really got, was like, look at how much you're trying and just like reaching. And that's the way my ego works, is like it hyper focuses, and like being able to take a step back from that and just be like, be patient, surrender, and it will come when it comes, and just keep doing the work and trust the process. So
that's so beautiful. Yeah,
that's my block to getting there. Not quite primal. Just got to dissolve my ego.
Just that.
Yeah, just that. Not a big deal. Trealor, thank you so much for being here on the podcast. It's always such a pleasure to have you. If any of you want to work with Trealor one-on-one for 3 months, please set up a free consultation with her. You can visit mastersofselfuniversity.com. And if you want to work with me or Danny, you can also set up a free consultation. Subscribe, rate, review, comment, share.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed this podcast, this is the 3rd time Trealor's been on here.
Yeah.
So if you enjoyed listening to her, please go back and watch her previous episodes. She's such a joy, such a light to have on. And I'd highly recommend going back and giving them a listen.
Yes.
So thank you everyone, and thank you Trealor for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much. Lots of love.